Hey, looks like we are live. Cool. I'm Derek Wetmore, 1500 ESPN, senior editor, Twins analyst, a couple other things I'm doing over here. But I wanted to take your questions today. We missed our Tuesday morning coffee Q&A. I'm so sorry for that. I had radio stuff, had some podcast stuff. But I figured let's get back at it with a little after lunch coffee. That's what I'm doing. You're free to do whatever you want to, but fill up the room. Save some questions, drop them in the comment box. It's pretty easy to do, and I'll get to as many of them as I can. I always try to do that on Tuesday mornings before a radio hit. Now this one's after a radio hit, so no big deal. It's all the same. If you want to catch that, Brian Murphy and Ben Gessling had me on today on 1500ESPN.com on the radio side of things. You can actually go to 1500ESPN.com, and there's an on-demand section where you just download the podcast of every hour. I would have been in hours 3 and 4 talking about the Twins, potential Brian Dozier destinations, prospects that you'd want back in return, and a lot of other fun stuff. On the Dozier prospect trade front, easy for me to say, our guy, Darren Doogie Wolfson, with a new report that there are other teams involved. I got to get off of Twitter here so I stop getting distracted. But Doogie's tweet yesterday at the recording of this was that there are several other teams, not just the Dodgers. You're also looking at the St. Louis Cardinals, the Washington Nationals, and what was the other team? San Francisco Giants are all in trade dialogue for Brian Dozier. I wrote about a couple of teams 2 weeks ago that could make some sense. It was speculative. It was just, here's their roster. Here's how good they are without Dozier. Here's their window to win. Do they have the prospects to get a Dozier deal done? And the Cardinals were one of the teams on my list. Interesting to see that they are involved. I was very surprised by the Nationals. If you guys have any questions on any of that stuff that's going down, please feel free to ask. But I want to jump into some of these comments now. We'll get to some of these. Christy's the first one in here, so I will answer that first. What's up, Christy? Understand what value a Dozier trade could bring for much-needed pitching, but do you think that it would make fans even more angry than they already are? Yes, I do. I think it would make a lot of fans angry. I talked about that on the radio today. Murph asked me, well, how do you sell 2017 if you trade Brian Dozier? My answer is pretty easy in that it's not easy. You don't. You can't sell 2017. If you trade Brian Dozier, it's clearly not a win-now trade. Unless you get a starter that'll be, a mid-rotation guy for you. Even trading for a mid-rotation starter, I think, would be a downgrade over Brian Dozier in 2017. So it would be hard to sell the fans on it, Christy, and I am fully with you there. I know you are firmly in the camp of wanting to keep Dozier. I don't see that as the best long-term strategy for the Twins. I think the best long-term strategy is to try to win as many games as you can. In 2017, let's call them, I think they could pop up and be 500, but that would be sort of the absolute max. If you trade Dozier, it's probably not quite that high. They're probably a sub-500 team. So that's tough to stomach. And if you're a Twins fan, I wouldn't blame anyone really for wanting to punt on that season and saying, well, if they're not trying, why should I buy tickets? I'm not in the business of selling tickets. I'm lucky in that way. I think that their best play, though, long-term, is to trade Dozier. And then you're going to win more games in the future. And I just think ticket sales follows winning. I don't think you can focus on the ticket sales or the marketing of the 2017 team. I think it probably will from a perception standpoint. I think it'll take a hit. And I think that's one of the things you just have to live with if you're Thad Levine and Derek Falvey. So it's a good question, Christy. I'm going to give you a thumbs up for it. But, that's a separate conversation, and if I was the Twins front office, I don't think I'd spend a lot of time thinking about it. I think, honestly, I would just try to make the winning move. Got some more questions. Andy Carlson, when should the Twins have moved on from Terry Ryan? Also, I like the sweater. Who shot the couch? Thank you, Andy. You don't like this? Man, I'm sick and tired of people ragging on the sweater game. You guys got no taste. When should they have moved on from Terry Ryan? It's hard to say because Terry Ryan's process, I would argue, was flawed. I think that he was trying to do too much. He wasn't just hyper-focusing on roster building. He had his hands in a lot of other things, and I think that's problematic. They're probably, look no further than the fact that the Twins replaced him with two guys. I mean, Derek Falvey's technically the new Terry Ryan, and then Falvey hired a GM. I know Terry had a second in command. That would have been Rob Antony and some other people on and on down the list. But frankly, in my opinion, they were running too small of a front office. You'll see that filled out over the course here. You've already seen what I'd consider the addition, a front office addition, even though technically it's a coaching staff audition, is Jeff Pickler. Adding him to the coaching staff, I think, is a step forward for the analytics of the organization. But technically, I mean, he's on Paul Molitor's coaching staff. To create room, they moved assistant hitting coach Rudy Hernandez, took him off the bench. They're not going to spin it like this. He's getting a demotion. Here's a guy who was on the bench. Now he's going to be sitting behind the scenes, working video, working in the batting cage. He's not the primary hitting coach. He's the second hitting coach. And the Twins' new regime effectively said, we don't need two hitting coaches sitting on the benches. We'll take our new hitting coach, James Rowson, who comes over from the Yankees, and they'll just replace that role on the bench with an analytics, game strategy kind of guy, Jeff Pickler. My first impression with him, he seems like a sharp guy, but how do you know? You're talking to him on a conference call. It's hard to say, but he comes from a smart organization, and he comes with high praise. So we'll see what that addition means for the Twins, but that's just kind of... Sorry, Andy, it's a long way of answering the question. I think Terry was trying to run, the best way I can put it, a mom-and-pop shop in the age of big business. Other major league front offices were moving towards big corporations, and the Twins wanted to sort of operate as a family company. That's the sense I get. I could be totally wrong on that, but that's my perception. And so from that perspective, I think Terry Ryan's been overmatched since he retook over the job. I don't think it means he's not a qualified person. In fact, I think that the Phillies got a good one when they hired him as sort of like a special advisor kind of role. I think Terry Ryan is going to be fantastic in that role for Philadelphia. But I don't think that he was, uniquely equipped to run a baseball front office without building out the staff around him. So I don't know if that answers your question, Andy, but I hope that it does. And come back when you figure out what sweater game is, okay? Brian says, does the Viking Stadium still have that new car smell, or does it stink just like the team? I gotta say, as an objective observer, I still really like US Bank Stadium. I'm anti-public funding for stadiums. I think it's a stupid thing to do to ask the public to put up money and pay for these palaces, for these private companies that treat themselves like public entities. But US Bank Stadium's pretty awesome. I saw a report, I was on Twitter earlier today, the Star Tribune has a report that some of the tiles, the black tiles on the outside are falling off, so imagine there's going to be some follow-up stories on that, and some people are going to get upset. But inside and in the press box anyways, and down you go into the tunnels and into the locker room and stuff, still a really cool stadium. I can't take that away from it. Brian, thanks for stopping by. I thought maybe you'd have some Twins questions for me, Brian, but I have spent a good amount of time this year covering the Vikings as well. Let's see. Oh, Brian, before I forget, if you are into Viking stuff, you better be following my guy, Matthew Collar. He's our new Vikings writer. He replaced Andrew Kramer at the beginning of this season, and Matthew's fantastic. A lot of in-depth Viking stuff. He does a podcast called the Sports Analytics Department. Just a sharp guy. Loves hockey, too, so... It's almost like he's one of us. Moved here from Buffalo to cover the Vikings. But check out him. He'll be happy to answer all your Vikings questions, I'm sure. Tom Roller, my buddy Tom, can you see us, outside of trading Dozier, adding to our rotation or bullpen? Sure. Thad Levine said in the town hall, right? He said he'd like to add a veteran arm to the bullpen. You're looking at prices, though, right? Brad Ziegler just signed sort of a big money deal for the kind of reliever he is. And, of course, the Aroldis Chapman, Kenley Jansen, Mark Melancon, they're not adding somebody of that ilk. Obviously, there's nobody left, but even the Cubs trading for Wade Davis. You look at Aroldis Chapman leaving and then think, ooh, they're going to have a hole in their bullpen. Well, they trade Jorge Soler. I don't see the Twins trading a Soler type for a back end of the bullpen arm right now. I think they'd be a couple years away from potentially making any move like that. But don't sleep on some of the younger guys too, Tom. I think they are going to have some intriguing arms competing in the bullpen, that is. Not in the starting rotation necessarily, at least not out of spring training. But don't forget, the fact that the Twins have some prospects, just because we don't talk about them a whole lot, does not mean that they can't be sort of help build a serviceable bullpen. I also think, are you willing to spend big money on a reliever if you're not going to win the World Series? I just don't know where the economics of that is right now. I think the Twins need to improve their bullpen, and obviously they need to improve their starting rotation. But I would look more toward a trade to do that than maybe sign some of the guys left in the market. We'll see. I'm curious to see how this roster takes shape as they get towards spring training a little bit. Tim Stang. If you were the manager, where would Dozier hit in the lineup? Good question. I'm not huge on lineup construction, to be honest with you. I just try, if I was the manager, I think that I would try to get the best hitters up to the plate as often as possible. So whether you sort that by on-base percentage or some other weighted stat like weighted on-base average or weighted runs created plus, I don't think that you can really nitpick too much. You try to get your, 3 best hitters up front. A lot of teams are still going the power hitter route at 4, but there have been studies that say the most important differentiator in a lineup is the number 2 hitter. I don't know. Dozier's an interesting case because the on-base percentage is only there when he's hitting. You remember last year he had an on-base south of 300 before he turned it on those final couple of days of May after he was benched to work on his swing. That's when he took off and became amazing. If it's that Brian Dozier, I think I'd hit him second or third, maybe. Miguel Sano is going to be interesting in this, though. If you're the Twins, I think I want Sano hitting third. I'm curious to see what Byron Buxton can bring, but if he brings what he brought in September, you could bat him anywhere. He could hit first, second, third, fourth, fifth would be perfectly fine. I think I'd want, in an ideal world, Buxton to lead off, but if he can't handle that right now, find another spot for him in the lineup. Long way to answer your question, Tim. It doesn't matter a whole lot to me. I'd just try to have Brian Dozier up near the top. You'd like some of those home runs to come with guys on base. I understand that, but there's only so much of that Dozier gets to control. If he's batting leadoff or second or third, there's no guarantee the guys in front of him get on base. But I don't know. Maybe ask the Dodgers where they're going to hit him in their lineup this upcoming year. Tom, didn't the Nationals already gut their farm system to trade for Adam Eaton? Yeah, that's why I was surprised to see the Nationals in Doogie's tweet. Second part of your question is, also, is he going to take Drake LaRoche with him to Washington? I don't know that answer, but I was looking at the Nationals infield, right, when Doogie's tweet came out. Holy smokes. Where are they going to fit Brian Dozier if they try to trade for him? A, do they have the prospects to get it done? They've got the Robles kid, but do the Twins need an outfielder? Their number 2 prospect, according to MLB.com, is a pitcher. All right. I don't see the bevy of prospects in Washington's system that I do in the Dodgers, and that's not even close to a hot take. I think that's pretty universally accepted. So, boy, from a prospects perspective, I don't think you'd be as excited if you're the Twins. Unless they're giving you a major league starter. All right, hey, I'm listening. But if you're talking about a fit for the Twins, not sure the Nationals are the best fit. Also, if you're the Nationals, what do you need Brian Dozier for? Yeah, he'd make your offense even better than it already was, but you've got Bryce Harper. Your outfield, look, here's their outfield. Bryce Harper, Adam Eaton, and who's in left? Jason Worth. Okay, Jason Worth, say what you want. Still got a bat. Look at their infield. Anthony Rendon at third. Fine, take it. Trey Turner at shortstop, the young prospect that a lot of people have high hopes for as a shortstop and as a hitter. Daniel Murphy at second base. He's pretty well entrenched. Dozier might be better defensively, but it's not like, he's 5 wins better defensively. And then at first base, where it gets interesting, they've got Ryan Zimmerman and his bloated contract. Yeah, it's a lot of money to be paying Zimmerman, but he's their penciled-in first baseman right now. It'd be hard to see anything giving there in that infield situation. that a Brian Dozier would make sense. If it wasn't for Zimmerman, maybe say trade for Dozier, plug him in at second base, slide Daniel Murphy over to first base where his bat would still fit just fine, and there you go. You got yourself an offense to go with that stud pitching staff in Washington. It just wouldn't make a lot of sense to me that would be a very good fit. At least that the Nationals would be willing to give up enough to make it worth the Twins' while to move Brian Dozier. Frankly, Jose De Leon's probably a really good centerpiece if you're looking at a Dodgers deal, not a Nationals deal. As to the second part of your question, I do not believe that the all-time leader Drake LaRoche is going to Washington, but I will. I'll check in on that. If I hear otherwise, I'll let you know, Tom. Brian again asks, the Twins are a glorified farm team. Have been for years. Develop one or two players at a time and trade them off, and that's what you get. Okay, so that's more of a comment than a question, and I don't know where you want me to take it, so I'm going to go on. Robert asks, what is what is Joe Mauer's trade status value? I think you're joking, but if you're not, that's like an epic troll. Brian Dozier is the one we're talking about trading potentially in this video. Joe Mauer has a full no-trade clause. I don't know if that's breaking news to you or not. Twins are not going to be able to trade Joe Mauer's contract. They're just going to have to live with it. Who are the Twins' building blocks? Actually, Christy, great question. You get a thumbs up for that. The Twins have a couple of really good building blocks, and I understand why people would be sour on them. They've lost a lot, and their pitching sucks. I get why, if you were a fan of the Twins, you would be very mad right now. Not my job to tell you that you're wrong, but I will say that the public perception of where the Twins are doesn't really mesh with my perspective of where they could be headed in the very short term. You've got building blocks like Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano around which to build, and then a nice young player in Max Kepler. I really like Jorge Polanco. Not sure if he's a shortstop, but I like his bat. So there are some things to be genuinely excited about if you're a Twins fan. The pitching needs to get better. No question about it. Not going to argue that. And the defense can't be so crappy again next year. Those are basic starting points that if those two things don't get fixed, none of this stuff matters. This conversation that we're having, no matter what you get for Brian Dozier in a possible trade, if you commit the most errors, and I think the error total actually undersells how bad they were on defense last year. That's how awful they were in the field. And the pitching, if those two things don't get better, the rest of this is just window dressing. You've got to address those two things. But when you ask about building blocks, I mean, Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano, from my perspective, are still two of the best young players in the big leagues. Ask other big league clubs if they'd want to take Sano and Buxton off your hands. I think you'd get a lot of quick yeses. What will it take? I did a podcast with Phil Mackey on that, actually, Christy. If you're interested in checking it out, go to iTunes and subscribe to the Touch 'Em All podcast, because we do one Twins podcast every week, sometimes two, sometimes three, but usually one. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Usually one podcast a week, and this week's, the Christmas week into New Year's edition, was, who would you rather have, Byron Buxton or Miguel Sano? And the good thing for the Twins, they won't have to choose. But we had a fun discussion on that very thing about why those guys are two valuable players in the sort of nucleus that the Twins are building here. So anyway, Christy, it's a good question. Thank you for asking it. And yeah, it's better than the Joe Mauer trade value question, I'll say that. Lars, what do you got? Thumbs up on the sweater. Thank you. Thumbs up on the comment. Do you think that the new regime will be better at turning our quote-unquote hype prospects into actual quality ball players? Don't know. It's a good question, but I think it's hard to answer before we've seen anything. My inclination is to say yes, but my other inclination is to say the old front office, I don't think was that bad at that. Like, if there's a problem in matching up the expectations with the actual results on the field, I always think it's a problem of the expectations, not of the development. Lars, if you want to follow up, just throw in the comments and I'll read it later in the video. Like, players that you thought were going to be fantastic and that the Twins really failed to develop. Prospects missed, don't get me wrong. There have been some guys, you'd like to see Cole Stewart farther along than he is right now, for example. Nick Gordon, I think a lot of people have high hopes for. We'll see what he becomes as a shortstop, but he's probably not the shortstop this year, I would guess, just based on his age and proximity to the big leagues. But yeah, as a way of answering that question, I think that it's always a problem of expectation more than it is of actual talent development. But I'm curious to see if Derek Falvey actually has a program that he's able to install and allow Twins pitchers to succeed at a higher rate. I'll be surprised, but if he does, it's a fantastic hire for the Twins. And if that's some sort of trade secret that now only the Indians and the Twins have, like, whoa, great. That would be a big step forward for the Twins. I'm skeptical because if something like that existed, I think a lot of teams would be employing it, and eventually it wouldn't be a competitive advantage anymore. That's a long-winded way of saying we'll see. If you guys can tell, I have dug into the coffee once again this afternoon. Let's see, skipping past that one, Brian. Robert. Robert says, just look at what happened to the Twins when they got to their palace. Promised to be competitive every year if we gave in to them, and now we have this. Not my issue, not my deal. Don't care because I already said I don't like publicly funded stadiums. I love Target Field. I don't think taxpayers should have paid for it. What more do you want me to say? Eric. Hey, Derek. Who has a better chance of making the starting rotation this spring training, Trevor May or Jose Barrios? Just curious your thoughts. Really good question, and you get a thumbs up just for that. Eric, I think Barrios, and it's tough for me because I see both of those guys as being in the starting rotation. I wrote maybe a month ago now about 5 players who could help the Twins starting rotation. Well, one of them was Trevor May, and it's because he's been in the bullpen. But I think I don't want to say miscast as a reliever, but I think he's undervalued if he's like your 7th inning reliever. I think Trevor May has the ability to be a 200 innings pitcher and a quality like mid to back rotation starting pitcher who strikes some batters out. I think he's come a long way in the control and command department, so we'll see how that plays out over an extended period of time. But he had flashes last year out of the bullpen where he was fantastic. He had dreadful stretches too, obviously, so the final numbers actually look really brutal for Trevor May. And he got hurt multiple times, and that sucks for him. And it sucked for the Twins, and here they are. I think in spring training this year, Trevor May needs to be given every opportunity to show that he's a starting pitcher. I think the bullpen experiment should be done. With that being said, Jose Barrios was kind of a train wreck in the big leagues too. It wasn't just the high ERA. I think you can get past that if you look at the pitches, the quality of the pitches, and the process he was going about pitching. The real problem for me, he exhibited no ability to command his fastball. And if you have no control of a fastball, you can have as good of a changeup as you want and as good of a breaking pitch as you want. You can throw 100 miles an hour. But if you're going to walk 5 guys every 9 innings, it's not going to work for you. And I think that was the problem with Barrios. Early on, some people were attributing it to nerves. I think it's more than that. I think he was struggling legitimately with his command, and we'll see where he's at with that in spring training. Or I guess in the if he's pitching in the WBC or in some winter ball, we can see it there. Doesn't tell as much to me as spring training and on into the season. That's what I tend to focus on. I still think Barrios is a number 2, number 3, number 4 starter for the Twins, but I don't think he's got ace potential, and I don't really think that he's the savior of the pitching staff all on his own. Long answer to your question, I think that both of them will make it into the starting rotation. I think if you don't add any more arms, you kind of need those guys in the rotation. But if I'm looking at it right now, just to break it out, this is off the top of my head, but we spend a lot of time thinking about these things. Irvin Santana, Phil Hughes, Trevor May, J.O. Barrios, then some combination of Kyle Gibson, Hector Santiago, Tyler Duffy. Maybe there's somebody that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, so sorry. Actually, you know what? I'll Google it right now. Like Twins depth chart. Let's see what MLB.com has to say. I just think that you're looking for upside arms if you're the Twins, and I think that both of those guys have that capability. Yeah, the 6 that the Twins have listed on their website, take that for what it's worth because it's not official. But Santana, they've got Santiago, Gibson, Barrios, Duffy, and Hughes. So they have Trevor May still listed in the bullpen. Fine, but I would put him in the rotation in spring training. I think you really need to fix the starting rotation. That needs to be priority number 1. You can find a 7th-inning guy later. Maybe the trio at the back end of the bullpen should be Glenn Perkins, Brandon Kinsler, Ryan Presley. And that's fine. I think you'll take that in a year where you're looking to be kind of like in the mix, but not a real big World Series contender. After losing 103 games, it's hard to make that huge jump. Keep your eye on Glenn Perkins in spring training. That'll be a big one for the Twins. Thank you for the question, Eric. That was a good one. Let's see. I'm going to read this question. Screen it. How are we doing on time? Okay, almost 2 o'clock. We got time for some more. Dustin, I'll try and get some rapid fire because I don't want to keep you guys here all day. I'm sure you got things to do on your holiday week. Dustin, team who can post the best value for Dozier. The Dodgers seem to have the best pieces, but seem like they aren't willing to part with more than one of them. Cardinals seem more willing to part with... I got to open up and see more of your comment. The Cardinals seem like they're more willing to part with more prospects, but not their highest guys. I don't know what that perception is based on from your perspective, Dustin, but if you're the Dodgers, do you want to give up multiple top 5 prospects? No stinking way. You're already putting Jose De Leon in the trade. If you're LA, you're already feeling like you're giving up a lot for Brian Dozier. And if you're the Twins, I think you're getting a lot for Brian Dozier. If there's haggling on other pieces of the trade, I understand that. I don't think it's equal value for value to go De Leon for Dozier straight up. But I wouldn't say that there's like a rebuff from the Dodgers or anything. Look, it's posturing on both sides. The Twins have to say, oh, we'd be willing to start the season with Dozier. And the Dodgers have to say, we don't want to give up the world. We'll be fine without Dozier. That's just the impasse, quote-unquote impasse, which I think is a funny word. That is just what happens in trade negotiations. Don't read too much into that. I would say if a deal's not done by spring training, I think I'll be surprised. I think that it makes just too much sense for the Twins. You've got to take some kind of a deal. But they have said, for the record, they'd be willing to start the season with Dozier. I think it'd be a mistake, but they could do that. Let's see. Eric again. As Twins fans, we make pastime out of the, quote, pitch to contact philosophy. Pitch to contact is a great philosophy if your defense is solid. See more comment here. I have concerns about Sano's defense at third. Should he be a future first baseman when Mauer's contract is up? Okay, piece by piece. Let's just go quickly here. Pitch to contact, yeah, that's always sort of been like misquoted. The Twins' philosophy was more like try to get weak contact. They didn't value strikeouts enough, in my opinion. But I also think there's a faction of fans who think that the only thing that matters is strikeouts, and that's just not true. It's a lot more nuanced of a conversation than that, and we could talk for hours about the subtleties of pitching and attacking hitters and stuff like that. If the Twins were going for weak contact and trying to get a bunch of ground balls, you're right. They need better infield defense. I think Sano's a question mark at third base, but I'm not ready to write him off yet. Let's see how he does in 2017. Let's see if he trimmed down. Let's see if he can hold up for a full season, injury-wise, right? Because I still think that's a concern if you're the Twins. So, hold on. I do think Miguel Sano could be a future first baseman. I think when Mauer's contract is up, it might make sense to slide him over there. But he's 23 years old, and I'm not willing to decide that today. What is it, December 27th, 2016. I think that's a maybe future conversation to have, but I'd spend 2017, if I was the Twins, I would spend it putting Miguel Sano in the lineup every possible day at third base and seeing what the body of work looks like. Not only as a fielder, but also as a hitter, and also from a health perspective. I think those are 3 important things for the Twins to figure out this year. Good question. Solid, Eric. 2 for 2. I appreciate you coming by. Stop by next week, too. We'll do another one of these. I could always use your good questions. Dustin, follow-up to Eric's pitching question. That was the May Barrios question, I believe. If May doesn't make the rotation, does he get relegated to the bullpen again, or do they try to find value for him in a trade? Interesting. I like where your head's at, Dustin, because I would try to capitalize on that too. Personally, I wouldn't be in the business of trading Trevor May right now, but if there's a contender who loses a couple starters in training camp and needs a back-end starting pitcher, yeah, you could do worse than Trevor May in that role. I don't think you get big value out of him, and I also think it's always a little risky to say, well, let's see who gets hurt. Let's see if somebody goes down, and then we'll pull the trigger on a trade. I think you have to plan for a little more certainty than that. But with that being said, I guess the only certainty is uncertainty, right? So it's a good question. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to get a better feel for what the new regime thinks of Trevor May. Keep that one in mind. Let's see. Robert Nelson. Hey, Derek. Noting Encarnacion's new contract, 3 years. Do you sense teams going away from the longer 8 to 10 year deals? Well, I'll read the rest of your question first. Mauer and Prince Fielder contracts painful for their respective teams. Sure, as was like the A-Rod contract by the end, right? Pujols is going to be a painful contract. I don't know exactly what I think about that, but I think you're still going to see superstars get paid. I think Bryce Harper's going to sign a big money deal, right? There's already been talk of will he make $400 million. Like, whoo, we're talking a lot of money over a lot of years, and you're just going to see that for the best players because they hold a ton of leverage. Bryce Harper's just so much better than the next best outfielder when he hits the market that he's going to command a high salary. Encarnacion, for me, I like Encarnacion. Don't get me wrong. Nice player. The Indians are easily the front runner in the American League Central. I don't think Encarnacion's a superstar in the way that Bryce Harper is or in the way that Joe Mauer was at the time or Prince Fielder was perceived to be. These are like the top level. Encarnacion's kind of like the next tier. So it's not that surprising to see him take a short-term big money deal. I was a little surprised to see Cleveland make that splash, but I think it's a great signing for them. They'll be fun to watch this summer. They get their pitchers back healthy. Still got Corey Kluber leading that rotation, and it's going to be a really, really fun team to watch as they try to defend their AL crown. I don't think they're the best in the American League, but they're one of the most interesting. I don't know if that answers your question, Robert. I hope that it does. If it doesn't, follow up and I'll get back to you. Tom, is Duffy really an option? If his curveball isn't hitting its spots, he's a wreck. He reminds me of a slightly better Deduno. I think it's less about the curveball for Duffy and more about the fact that he only has 2 pitches, really. He's got the fastball, and I like his curveball a lot. But if he doesn't have a changeup to keep people off of those, like you kind of just get to sit and guess on the plane. If you can sit back, if you're facing Tyler Duffy and you can keep your weight back and read curve, like expect curve and adjust to the fastball, I think you're in really good shape because it's not like he has pinpoint control. He's just sort of like it feels weird to say because it's not like he has an upper 90s fastball, but he's like a power pitcher with that power breaking ball. And if you don't sit on the fastball, I still think you can catch up to it if you're Tyler Duffy. But if you're Duffy, if you're facing Tyler Duffy, I'm tying myself in knots here. If you add a changeup in your Tyler Duffy, I think you're at a much better chance to keep righties and lefties off balance, and that's something he really struggled to do last year. I had fairly high expectations for Tyler Duffy coming out of spring training. I thought he was going to lock down a rotation spot. I thought he was going to be a fine back-end starter, and it turned out the only reason he kept making starts is because the Twins didn't have anybody better. Same is true of Kyle Gibson, Ricky Nolasco for stretches, Hector Santiago for stretches. It was like, man, things were not good for the Twins starting rotation. There's a lot of turnaround candidates. I think Kyle Gibson's that guy. I think Tyler Duffy's that guy. I've mentioned 2 other guys in Barrios and Trevor May, and don't forget about Phil Hughes. But you see, when you start getting this list of a long list of players that's like, oh, he could be better, and he could be better, and he could be better, and he could be better, it becomes problematic because you're hoping on a lot of things breaking right for you. If you're the Twins, some of those things are going to break right for you, and here's the secret that nobody likes to talk about before spring training. Some things are going to break against you as well. You get good luck, you get bad luck. It's just the way baseball and sports work. So, yeah, Duffy's definitely a candidate, but I wouldn't write his name in pen in the starting rotation right now. I think he's got some upside as a big league starter, but I don't think that you count on him for sure 100% as one of your 5 starters out of spring training. I think that's what 2016 Some people might say that sounds harsh. I don't think that's harsh at all. I think 2016 was a bad year for Tyler Duffey, and he'll have to prove that he's moved beyond that or can be a better pitcher than that in 2017 if he wants guarantees. Dustin, so no answer, just an explanation how trade negotiations work, which I already knew. Thanks, LOL. All right, I'm scrolling back up to your question. Which one? Are you talking the Dodgers one? Team that could post the best value. That must be what you're talking about. Yeah, the Dodgers, by a lot. The Dodgers have a full complement of starting pitchers. They're going to have too many starting pitchers for the rotation, so watch how those pieces move. And they also have the best stable of prospects. I'm sorry I didn't answer that question the first time. Totally got lost. Yeah, a lot of posturing right now, though. Don't be super duper surprised if some team is just saying something right now to improve their leverage, their negotiation, or just to improve their perception publicly. Teams can do that too. That's PR. So who is the best value? It's like the Dodgers are the best match by a long shot. That's why you're hearing so much about him. But thank you for keeping me honest, Dustin. You get a like for that. Pitch to contact, the Twins way. All right, thanks for stopping by, Darren. Devin Tollefson, think Buxton and Sano really break out next season? I think Buxton broke out in September. I think he is a superstar potentially waiting to happen. We'll see if he puts it together for a full season. Miguel Sano broke out in his rookie year. Yeah, he had a step back last year, but I wrote about on 1500ESPN.com that even a step back for him, he's still a valuable hitter for the Twins. He's still at 25 bombs. He's still above average offensively for basically every position he would play except designated hitter. What more do you want from the guy? If he can play middle of the road third base and hit the way he hit in his rookie year or in his second season, he's a nice young player for the Twins. I think the expectations are so high for Sano that when he has like a quote-unquote down year, people think he's struggling so bad. I think that's way overblown. I think Sano had a bad year by his standards, but I think he's still a star in the making as well. Call me rose-tinted glasses. I think both of those two guys are studs for the Twins for the next 5 years. Mark, I will bet you a dinner for two at Murray's that they lose 90-plus this season. Oh, I wish I could bet on sports. It goes against my contract at 1500 ESPN. That one. But, man, if you think the Twins are going to lose 90 games again this year, I'd take that action. I think that the Twins, if they are put together the way they're currently constructed and maybe they add an arm or two or something like that, I think the Twins are better than a 90-loss team this year. Maybe that's a hot take. If that's a hot take, somebody let me know. But I think it's pretty reasonable to see them jump up at least 15 wins, probably more than that. If they hang on to Dozier, it'd be even easier to do that because he's a potential 5-6 win player. I understand, Mark, why you'd be frustrated or whatever. And I'd love to go get Murray's with you sometime, but I can't take that bet, unfortunately. It's not because I'm not confident in my opinion. It's because I don't want to bet on sports that I cover professionally. So that's the last question that I see in the feed here. If there are more, I'm sorry, guys. They're not coming up on my cell phone. I'll get to them later on my Facebook page. Go check that out. Derek Wetmore, MLB. On Facebook, and make sure you're liking, following 1500 ESPN as well. Some good stuff every week on the Twins from them. Last plug, and then I'll get out of here. Enjoy your guys' week, and I'll see you after the new year. But check out the Touch 'Em All podcast. If you like the Twins, please just listen to that. It's me and Phil Mackey talking for anywhere between 25 to 60 minutes each week about the Twins. It kind of takes an analytics bend a little bit, but we just try to have some fun with it. Some good analysis there. So check that out. Subscribe on iTunes, and please give us a 5-star review. We love those. That's it for this video. I'll catch you guys on Facebook later. Thanks for stopping by, and thank you for all the great questions. I'll talk to you next week. Happy New Year, guys.